Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. This week is the last week of my dessert collection and we're finishing up this collection by making a box of chocolates. What can be a better gift or a better dessert than a nice selection of chocolates? So I'm going to start out this week by making the chocolates to go in the chocolate box. I have some brown soap that I poured into this chocolate mold and I let it set up for about 10 minutes and then poured the excess soap out. And that's left me with a nice coating of brown chocolate around the edge of this soap mold. I have some pink soap which I have previously made and cured. I grated it up and dissolved it in some water and it's left it very thin. So that I can use my meat syringe to inject that into my mold. And as this soap sets overnight, the pink soap is going to set up into a gel-like consistency. I'm being very gentle inserting the pink soap to make sure that it doesn't break through the chocolate coating that's already in there. I let the soap set up in the fridge for a few hours and it has set up into a nice jelly-like consistency. I'm just using a spoon to add some more of that chocolate onto the back and seal up those chocolate hearts. I'm going to leave these chocolates to set up overnight, then I'm going to pop them in the freezer for a couple of hours and I can turn them out of their molds. Then I'm going to place them all on my chopping board and use a white soap at a very thin consistency to make a white chocolate drizzle on top of them to finish up these chocolates. Now we're going to move on to making the box that these chocolates are going to sit into. I have some blue soap dough here that I've kneaded to a nice smooth consistency, and then I have a rolling pin that has some guides on the end to make sure that I get a uniform thickness for this soap all the way through. I flattened out the soap dough as much as I could with my hands and placed it on the freezer paper to make sure that the soap isn't going to stick to my work surface as I roll it out. It's going to be quite a thin layer of soap that I'm working with to get a nice sturdy box. So here are the chocolates the next day and you can see them nicely set up with the white chocolate drizzle. And I'm going to go ahead and place those in the center of this soap dough that has been rolled out to see how large of a surface I want the box to be. I'm going to make this box of chocolates about 4 chocolates wide and 3 chocolates deep. So I'm going to go ahead and lay all of those out. I'm picking out the best ones, the ones that look really good, that have no deformities when they came out of the mold. And I am going to make sure I have them all at the same depth. I have a couple of different molds that I used and they are slightly different. So I'm just going to get them all as even and consistent as I can and lay those out so that I can measure out exactly how big I want this box to be. Alright, I have all my chocolates sitting there and I'm just using my ruler here to decide how big I want the box to be. I'm measuring the chocolates and then I added about an inch on. I'm moving down to the very bottom of my soap dough to make sure I can get as much use out of the sheet that I have already rolled out as possible. So I'm measuring out the length here and then I'm measuring the height of these chocolates, and again I'm going to add about 3/4 of an inch onto that to come up with the final size of this chocolate box. So I've cut the first 2 sides of the base of the box and then I'm going to go ahead and move all of my chocolates off of this rolled out soap dough so that I can cut the final size of the base and as many of the sides as I can from this sheet. So I'm being as precise as I can with this to make sure that my soap base ends up as square as possible. This chocolate box is going to have a lid and that lid is going to fit right on top, I hope, of the base. So the box needs to be nice and square. So I've just marked the corner that I have left to work with and I'm making sure that the width of the box is correct. And then I'm going to measure my 2 diagonals to make sure they are even and therefore make sure my box is nice and square. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to cut the remainder side of the base of the box and then I'm going to go ahead and cut the edges. The edges of the soap box I decided to make about an inch at the moment. I think my chocolates are about 3/4 of an inch and I want there to be a little bit of space at the top for the lid to fit on. So I'm going to cut them out about an inch, and I can cut those down at a later date if I decide I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the rest of the parts of my soap box and play a little game to fit in as many as I can on this sheet. Once I've got all those parts measured out and cut, I'm going to turn my freezer paper over and peel it back on itself away from the soap dough. And that's going to release the soap dough without tearing it at all. And I'll have a nice smooth surface for my box that I can work with. Alright, that batch made enough to make the base of the box and 2 of the sides. So I rolled out some more of the soap dough, and it is the same thickness as the rest because I used that rolling pin with the same guides. And I'm just using the existing sides that I have cut as a guide for the size. And I'm going to go ahead and cut those out, and then I can start working on forming my box. So I'm going to form my box on the base that it's going to be on. This will mean that I can move it around if I need to, but by the time the soap is cured I should be able to pick up the box and move it around without the assistance of the tray that it's on. Now the bond that I'm using to form this box is just distilled water, and I'm rubbing that around the edge of this soap dough piece, and then I'm going to place my edges right on top of that distilled water, and as that dries and evaporates it's going to make the soap stick together. So I'm just placing the edges along the edge of the base of the box and pressing them down and making sure that there is contact all the way along. And as you can see, that box edge is sticking already. I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 of those sides. Then I'm going to move on and fill my box up with those chocolates and have a look and see what it looks like. As you can see on the right, I did try making some little papers for these chocolates to sit in, but they just took up too much space in the box and I didn't really like the way that they looked as a final product, so I decided to just lay those chocolates in the box as they are. Now I did decide after placing those chocolates in the box that the edges were too high. There was a lot of distance between the top of the box and those chocolates, and it was just a little difficult to see them. So I'm cutting the edges down, and I've decided to cut them in half, which is great. It means that I can use the other half of those edges to create the top of the box. Now when I create the top of the box, I'm going to repeat the same process. But I am going to inset the edges just a little bit so that I can fit the top of the box right inside the bottom. Now that I have all of my edges cut to a uniform thickness, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process that I did earlier to stick those onto the base of the soap box. Now all of the soap that I've used to create this chocolate box is fully saponified. It's not fully cured yet, but it is saponified, so it is all safe. But I am going to leave this soap overnight to allow that distilled water to bind the soap edges to the top and bottom. I left the soap overnight to cure and set up, and this is the final result. The lid fits so nicely onto the base, and those chocolates look so adorable sitting there in their little tray. Thank you all so much for watching. and I'll see you next Tuesday.